everybody, Chris Parody here. I'm going to teach you how to play Mercy, Mercy, Mercy as performed by the Cannonball Adderley Quintet, written by the keyboard player Joe Zawinul. I've adapted it to guitar here. Put the capo on the 6th fret, and this is going to put us in the original key of the song from the early recordings that are out there of the full band playing it. Although feel free to move the capo around as you play this one more and more. You might find that if you move it to a lower fret, the deeper resonance of those keys, and also having a little bit more maneuverability with the wider frets, for some players that may be a better option. So although 6th fret here is just to get us in the original key, that's something that you can decide as you get to play this one a little bit more and become more familiar with it. So as we look at the first measure in the tab, we're going to start off and we're going to be almost immediately going into an A chord with an E in the bass. So throughout this one, the way I like to play my A chord is I bar that 2nd fret with my index finger. Of course, if you like to play A like that or like that, any which way will work, but you'll see me often just barring that 2nd fret with my index finger to play my A chord. And this one's going to have some interesting things for the picking hand to do, a little bit different than some of the other lessons that I've posted so far on this channel. A lot of those songs have had to deal with alternating bass songs where the thumb is playing an alternating bass line throughout something and we're maybe adding in 1 or 2 notes to complement what the thumb is doing. This one we're going to be playing much more kind of big chords, so we're going to be using all 4 fingers, sometimes simultaneously. Other times we might break them up into different groupings. Right at the beginning here, what we're going to do is play our bass note, open low E string with the thumb, and then the index, the middle, and the ring, they're going to pick in unison those 2nd fret notes on the D, G, and B string. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to an E7 chord. All we really need to do here is just fret the 1st fret of the 3rd string. You probably are used to playing E7 like that, with the middle finger also on the 2nd fret of the 5th string, but we're not going to play that string, so we can just fret that 1 finger, and we're going to play all 4 strings in unison there. So we're playing the thumb on the 6th string, index, middle, and ring on the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd string, getting that big chord out of there. Little visit from Melba here to kick off the lesson. Wouldn't be the same without her. Melba loves Cannonball Adderley. Mercy, Mercy, Mercy is one of her favorite songs. Alright, a couple things I want to note about that 2nd chord here. The first is just that, again, we're picking 4 notes with 4 fingers simultaneously, and we're adapting a keyboard song to the guitar. So I just like to think about how a keyboard player would play a chord and often sound all the notes simultaneously by just pushing the keys down all together. And that's something that when we're playing fingerstyle, we can also create that sound of a simultaneous chord, whereas if we were picking, we're going to hear more of that gradual release of the notes, even if we go pretty fast. But with fingerstyle, we can work on getting that really instantaneous sound of the chord. So just a cool conceptual thing to think about as we go throughout this song, because we're going to be doing a lot of chords where we do either 3 or 4 notes all together like that. The other thing, I didn't put this on the tab, but I just want to throw this in there, that whenever you're on this E7 chord, a cool little touch you can add in is to, instead of just going right to that 1st fret, hammering onto that 1st fret. So that would make what we have so far sound like this. And that's just always an option. This chord's going to come up a lot throughout the song. When there's something like that, what I would recommend is sometimes just go straight there, sound them all, and then sometimes do the hammer on. And that gives you a little micro variation that you can freely choose to add or subtract throughout your playing of the song. Okay, once you're there, keep that finger index on the 1st fret of the G string, 3rd string, and then take your pinky. You're going to bring your pinky up and you're going to fret the 4th fret of the low E string. We're going to pick the low E, the D, and the G, so 6, 4, and 3, with the thumb, index, and middle here, and get those 3 notes. So one little thing to note throughout the whole video, I'm going to be speaking relative to the capo. So I'm on the 4th fret with my pinky, 4 frets from the capo. It's the actual 10th fret. Okay, next thing is the middle finger is going to fret the 2nd fret of the D string, and we're going to pick that D string with the index finger. So we have a 3-fingered pick followed by just the index finger picking its string again as that 2nd fret note comes on. Okay, now we've got the first measure. It should sound like that. Let me play it one more time really slow. Okay, measure 2, we're going to come up to the 5th fret with the middle finger of the low E string. The index is going to bar the 4th fret of the A and the D string. So we're just trying to get 2 notes off that bar finger, so you don't have to bar the whole 4th fret. Just do what you need to get the 2 notes on A and D. That's going to give you these 3 notes. Okay, we're going to play those in unison though, like that, as we did before. After we play those in unison, the pinky's going to reach up to the 7th fret of A, the actual 13th fret. We're going to take that finger back off. That note that you heard at the end was just off my bar finger, so I never lifted the bar finger off. I just added the pinky, and then I subtracted the pinky. Okay, now take your bar finger and just move it back to the 2nd fret. We're going to play those 2 notes in unison, and there, pick those notes with your index and middle finger. That'll just keep things consistent from where you were before. Like that. And then your pinky is going to play the 4th fret of the D string. You could use your ring finger there too. Depends on what feels most comfortable for your hand and trying to reach up there to grab that 4th fret note. So that's going to give you this in the 2nd measure. Now we have a major theme of the song. These first 2 measures are going to be repeated 4 times, and that's going to give us the first 8 measures, which is the first 2 lines you see on the tab. Okay, so that gives us the first 8 measures, and again, those are the first 2 lines you see on the tab. Now we're going to be going into a new theme that's going to repeat, and that theme is going to start on that E7 chord again. Once again, we only need to fret that 1st fret of the G string. We're going to be picking the same strings we picked earlier, so we'll be on E, D, G, and B, 6, 4, 3, and 2, and we're going to hit that chord like that twice, sounding all those notes in unison. Again, if you want, you could add some hammer-ons onto that 1st fret note. Okay, now we're going to go back to that A/E chord. We're going to hit that twice. This is a good moment to note all these slashes. I didn't talk about this yet, but let me throw something in there about the slash. So if you don't know what a slash chord is, basically the first letter is telling you what chord to play, and the 2nd letter is telling you a very specific bass note to play on that chord. So here we're playing an A chord, as we normally would, but instead of playing the A string in the bass, we're playing the low E string. A little bit earlier, there was this chord where we were on the 1st fret of the G string and the 4th fret of the low E string. That was in measure 1. That chord is E7/G sharp, so we're playing an E7, but we have a G sharp in the bass. And there was also this chord, just this little 2-note chord, A/B. Again, we're playing just a little fragment of an A chord, but the bass note is a B there. So this is something that comes up in guitar quite a bit, but I think one reason we see it so much in this song is because this is a song that was composed on the keyboard, and the keyboard is going to have a lot more intricate and interesting things that the left hand is doing in the bass register. So as we translate it onto guitar, that's why these bass notes become so important in this one. So that's what's going on with the slash chords, kind of some cool stuff to think about and might influence some of your own experimentation and songwriting and things like that in the future. So coming back to where we were, we had that E7 to the A/E, Okay, we're going to go to E7 again. It's still E7, but we're going to add a different note into the voicing. So start with what you had, but then also add your pinky or your ring finger, depending on what you want to use, to the 3rd fret of the B string. And that's going to give us that sound. Again, it's still an E7 chord. All we did was we substituted, we had an open B note in there. Now we have a D note on that 3rd fret. Again, I'm speaking relative to the capo as though it wasn't there. So this is E7. This is E7 as well. They're just 2 different voicings of that chord. Okay, now we have a pretty substantial part of this second theme. Okay, so that gave me the next 4 measures, kind of heading into the 5th measure after that. And the rhythm there is really key, just trying to really listen to the rhythm, and I recommend trying to play along to the full band recording, and that can help so much with just getting nice solid timing. As you play that part. Another thing you might work on as you play that passage is not just the rhythm and the timing, but how long you're letting the chords ring for. Trying to get a nice punchy, driving, funky sound out of those chords. And the way to do that, you can see, if you look at my fretting hand, you can see my fingers just laying down very gently, just touching the strings to stop them from vibrating, muting that chord as soon as I don't want it to ring anymore. I'm also using my picking hand a little bit, kind of in collaboration with the fretting hand to get those strings to just silence. And again, it just takes a really gentle touch. All you have to do is just touch the string with your finger and it'll stop vibrating. And that can give you that nice staccato sound on the chords. Now maybe we're starting to sound more like a horn section as well as we play that part. So yes, think about the rhythm and the timing, and as part of that, think about exactly how long each of those chords should be ringing for. And there may be just these little bits of space and silence between chords that is really important to getting that part to sound nice and lively as it does in the full band recording. Okay, now we're heading down to the 4th line of the tab, so that took us through the first 3 lines now. We've done 2 of the major themes so far. And as we get to the 4th line, we're going to start with the middle finger on the 2nd fret of the D string. We're going to play that note twice, picking with our index finger on our picking hand. Okay, now we're going to come back to a chord that we played earlier. It was that E7/G sharp. That was the one where the index frets the 1st fret of the G string, the pinky, the 4th fret of the low E string. We're going to pick the E, D, and G, 6, 4, and 3. Pick that note on the G string 1 extra time, so your middle finger's just going to sound that string again. It had just picked it a moment ago in the big 3-note chord. Okay, now move your index finger up 1 fret to the 2nd fret. You're going to fret the 4th fret of the A string with your ring finger. And there's a little picking thing you need to pay attention to on your picking hand, which is your index finger was on the D string, and now it's going to be moving to the A string. Same deal there, pick the 3 notes. So this was string 6, 5, and 3, E, A, and G. And then have your middle finger, like it did on the last chord, pick its note an extra time there, that 2nd fret of the G string. And that's going to move you to one other chord after that. Your index finger, it's just going to move up and back to the 1st fret of the D string. And your middle finger is going to fret the 2nd fret of the low E as your pinky frets the 4th fret of the G. It's going to give you that chord. This is a B/F sharp chord. Okay, that's going to give us this. Okay, that's another moment there. I think that chord wants to be really punchy and short, that last chord. A little bit of silence before we get to the next chord. Okay, the next chord is going to be A/B. So again, we're going to be barring that second fret, but bar it even one more string this time so that you can get the second fret of A in there. That's going to give us that bass note of a B. If the bar is too tricky for you, unfortunately, there's not really too much you could do here, although there is an alternative I'll mention in a moment. But if you can play this bar, it's going to make this part a little bit easier because your pinky then needs to go to the 5th fret of the B string. Now here, what I usually do is I go like that with my picking hand. So this is kind of the first time in the song where I haven't sounded all the notes in unison. Instead, I start on my thumb and I fire my fingers off one at a time. So I try to kind of just let them roll from the thumb to the ring finger. And you might just start really slow if you haven't done that sort of thing before. Just kind of try to work that motion with the fingers until you get a nice smooth roll of those notes. So I roll up that chord. And that last thing I did was my ring finger picked the B string an extra 3 times. That 5th fret of the B string. And then we're going to jump back to that 1st fret of the G. Now this time, the only thing that changed was my picking fingers changed a little bit. My thumb stayed up there on the low E string open. My index, middle, and ring finger, this time they were on the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st string. And I picked all of those in unison. I want to take a quick tangent here to discuss an alternative fingering you could use on that passage of the song, just in case you find bars to be an impediment to learning songs, if you find them to be something that every time they come up you're gritting your teeth or feeling some pain in your hand, because it's probably one of the hardest things to do, especially on the steel string acoustic guitar. So although I use them sometimes in my playing, the longer I've played, the more important it's become to me to find ways of playing songs that feel good to play, that are physically comfortable, and that don't cause me to grit my teeth in pain as I'm trying to play something. So I always like to experiment with alternatives if I find a fingering to be too challenging. Of course, sometimes there's ones that you just have to do a certain way, and if you want to learn the song, you're just going to have to work on those slowly and see if you can build up the strength and comfort. However, I think a lot of times there are some creative alternatives that we could use. So I want to just throw one out here that you might consider on this particular part of the song, because not only is that bar tricky, but then you have to reach up with the pinky. So that's another thing that can be a little troublesome for some players on that part of the song. So instead, here's another thing you could do. You could take your index, middle, and ring finger, and you could fret the 2nd fret of A, D, and G. And that would give you these 3 notes. Those are 3 of the notes we needed off that bar finger. Now that last note was the 5th fret of the B string. So we could just use our open high E string there. The only little tricky thing here is your picking hand is going to have to go thumb, index, middle on A, D, and G, 5, 4, and 3. And then your ring finger is going to have to skip down to the high E string. And that gets you all the same notes. And then you'd have to pick that high E string those extra 3 times with your ring finger. So there's an alternative way you might consider playing if you found the other one to be not quite comfortable for your hand. Okay, then we're basically just going to play that theme again, but leave off that chord that we were just discussing there for a little while. There's a nice little pause here, and that pause is basically 2 beats long. And then we're going to play this little slide from the 2nd fret of A to the 4th fret of A. That's going to allow a couple possibilities here. So here's how I usually play it, is I slide to 4, and then I'm actually going to bar the whole 2nd fret with my index finger, and I'm going to pick that 2nd fret of D. The reason I do that is because the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to play that F sharp minor 7 chord. So there I was picking 6, 4, 3, and 2. E, D, G, and B strings. Now, going back to our other conversation a moment ago, if that bar feels too tricky for you, another thing you could do here is you could do the slide, and you could use your middle finger to fret that second fret of D, and then bring your other fingers onto the second fret in that formation. So my index is on the 6th string, that middle's where it landed a moment ago, second fret of the D, the ring finger's on the second fret of the G string, the 3rd string, pinky's on the second fret of the B string, the 2nd string. So that's another way you could play that too. Again, everybody's hands are different, everybody's challenges are different in learning songs. So I always look at things in as flexible a way as I can. I encourage my students to experiment with different fingerings. Like I said before, sometimes there's just a way you have to do something, but a lot of times there's multiple fingerings that can work really well and really efficiently. So that's kind of the key thing, is we're looking for efficiency, but we're also looking for a general comfort that's going to make the song enjoyable to play in the long run. Okay, so I'm going to be playing it off the bar just because that's what I'm used to. Okay, I'm going to grab that second fret of D one more time, and I'm going to immediately after I do, go up to the 4th fret. Same chord there. The 4th fret gives us G sharp minor 7. So you can play it like that. You could also play it like that. Sometimes in other songs I play it this way. That's a great fingering for that chord. Other people sometimes play it like this. They'll bar 3 notes with the ring, play the bass note with the middle finger. So again, a lot of different ways to do the same thing. Now we're coming to the first ending, and we can play right off that bar that we have on the 4th fret for that G sharp minor 7 chord. And we're going to play the 4th fret of the D string right off that bar finger. Then we're going to fret 2 frets ahead of there on the same string with our ring finger. And the 3rd note we're going to get can also come off the bar. That one was on the G string. All 3 of those notes I play with my index finger on the picking hand. And then from there, we're going to get into a C sharp minor chord. So you can keep that bar down again. Ring and pinky, they're going to go on fret 6, the actual 12th fret. And the middle finger is going to go on the 5th fret of the B string. And that's going to give us C sharp minor there. Again, speaking relative to the capo. So if you know a B minor chord already, just move that up 2 frets. And that will get you to C sharp minor, just to connect it to something that you might have already played on other things. And once you're there, you're going to play the whole chord. So your picking hand is going to play strings 5, 4, 3, and 2, A through the B string. So another 4-fingered unison pick there. We're going to pick everything together. And then take your fingers off so that you're just back to your bar. And you're just going to play only the notes on the D, G, and the B string, 4, 3, and 2. So no thumb picking there. And then we're going to put the notes back on to make C sharp minor again. Play all 4 notes. Keep your fingers there and pick again without the thumb. Then take your fingers off to go back to the bar. Pick those same 3 notes, no thumb again. And then finish with the whole chord again. Okay, so here's how that sounds when it comes all together. Like that. Let me do that one more time. Okay, so that gives us the first ending, and this is probably the most important ending, so let's discuss the endings a little bit. If you listen to the original version of the song, which I'm not remembering the name of the album, but I can picture the cover in my mind. So I will go back and find the specific album, and somewhere in the video I'll drop that in the text so you know what I'm referring to. On that album, they play this ending that we just learned here as the first, the second, and the third ending, also kind of as the 5th and final ending. They basically play through the song 5 times. So what you see in the tab as the second ending is really just ending 4 of 5 on that original recording. It's a little rhythmic variation. It's basically the same idea, but kind of a cool rhythmic twist. So we'll do that in a moment, but I just wanted to point out again, for the simplicity of the tab, I just put these 2 endings in here. So if you look at the tab, measure 1 of ending 1, you'll see that little pair of 8th notes at the end. and you just want to leave off the first of that pair, and you'll have ending 5. So here's what we had. And here's how ending 5 would sound. Something like that. So you can draw out that drama however you choose to. Basically just play that same thing, slow things down a little bit, maybe put a dramatic pause before that final chord, and then strum away at that final chord a little bit, and just drop that 1/8 note, basically beat 4, so you're only playing the and of 4. And that gives you the final ending. And that leaves us with ending 2 in the tab, which is really ending 4 of the 5 trips through the tune in the original recording. It's just a little rhythmic variation of what we've already been dealing with. So we're going to start on that C sharp minor chord again. We're going to hit the whole thing, hold that for 2 beats to half note, and then we're going to be going back and forth between the C sharp minor notes that are on the D, G, and B string. And we're going to start with those on, take them off, go back to the bar, put them back on, take them off and go back to the bar, and that would give us 3, E, and We're going to do almost the same thing on the 4th beat, except we're going to rest on the E of that set of 16th notes, so that would be 4, E, and then the next measure, we hit the big chord again. Okay, so how does that all come together sound-wise? We'd have 1, 2, 3, E, and 4, and 1. And that would be like this. Okay, so a little bit of a tricky rhythm. Good to just count that out verbally to yourself a few times and then play it a bunch of times. It's a nice little variation you can add in there if you're playing the tune like they do in the recording 5 or more times. And if you're playing with a band, it gives you a fun thing that you can add in there to, again, put a little variation into the endings each time. And I'd also recommend, we've talked so much about all of the different challenges of barring throughout the song. One thing you could do on a passage like this, and on many passages, is just highlight what the melody note is. And just practice the rhythm that way. That way you don't have to sit there holding down the bar finger for a really long period of time. That's one of the things that's challenging about barring, is when we're first learning a song, we're going to sit there holding that bar finger in for really extended periods of time, and it's just going to be so much more taxing compared to when we actually have learned the song and we're playing it with more of a sense of ease and flow. Those barred passages go by much faster. So something to be cognizant of when you're working with barred passages is you can sometimes just highlight what that melody note is. That'll allow you to practice the rhythm, and then you can try throwing everything back on there. I guess that would leave me with one other little thought for you. This part is really hard to play without barring. You could do it, it's just going to require a lot more finger movement, and for me, with the capo on the 6th fret especially, it's really challenging. But if you wanted to try to play this without the bar, you could not bar this finger, just get the bass note on that C sharp minor. You've still got all those notes there. And then what you would have to do is you'd have to go from these 3 probably to your index, middle, and ring, like that, which, again, for someone with smaller hands or with the capo further down the neck or completely off, then it might make it a little bit easier. But that would be my suggestion. Again, kind of like we talked about earlier, if you just wanted an alternative fingering there. Another thing you'll hear in the original version of the song is after each ending, before the song starts the next repetition of the tune, the keyboard will add in a little melodic figure that fills in the space between that ending and the start of the next repetition. It changes a little bit each time, so we could probably come up with a number of different things to play there. I'll just offer one little suggestion that I like to sometimes do, which is I come up to the actual 15th fret of the G and the high E string, and I pick those notes with my thumb and index finger. And then I go to the actual 12th and 11th fret of the D and the B string, and then to the actual 13th fret of the same 2 strings there. So that gives me that. And the way that would factor in is we'd kind of be going like that. So that's just one option. You could probably come up with all sorts of other cool little fillers that you could put in there. You could listen to that version and see what you could pick up from the keyboard, maybe copy what happens, or come up with your own little variations. So that's just one suggestion for how you can fill in that space. Another way is to not do anything there and just let the silence fill the space, which can be equally, if not more, effective. All right, that's Mercy, Mercy, Mercy. It's been one of my favorite songs since I first heard it in high school, and I've played it a number of different ways over the years, but ultimately I settled on this way, putting the capo on there, making use of open strings, putting it in a key that's really friendly to the guitar, and I hope you have fun learning it. Let me know if you have any questions. I recommend checking out some of the other versions of it out there. Another one of my favorite versions is the Maceo Parker one, which has a really lively, New Orleans-y sort of sound to it, but I'm sure there's other cool ones too. As I often recommend, listen to as many different interpretations as you can, because ultimately that will influence how you play the song and maybe even inspire you to make some of your own little twists to it over the years as you keep working on it. Okay, well, have fun, and I'll get back to you soon with another song.